Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 73 of the Dynasty Junkies podcast. I am your host, Rocky Petrella at Dynasty FF Addict on Twitter. Back here with my man Andrew Hall at Andrew Hall FF. Andrew, we're actually recording with no game on tonight. How you feeling?
I'm not gonna lie, it feels kind of weird, but I'm looking forward to it. Let's not have any distractions. Let's just zoom in on the conversation. I like it.
Yeah, we're recording a little early because it's Thanksgiving. Our normal day's Thursday. We're obviously not doing it Thanksgiving night. We got a great guest with us here on Tuesday night. John Luke Garofalo of Front Yard Fantasy. John Luke, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you, fellas, for having me on. It's about damn time.
And one thing I didn't put on the sheet, but I've been meaning to ask you about. I guess I could have told you for the show, but I said that just sprang it on you. I was always wondering, how did you guys decide to do like the whole game show thing? Like I'm a part of DGN, which I think was around before you guys, but isn't like out there everywhere that everybody is like knows about it. So I don't even know if you guys were aware of it. But I think it's a really great thing, and you guys are doing it every day. You're doing it as a live stream, whereas DGN is just an occasional podcast. And it's just I was just always curious how you guys came up with that idea and maybe even got together in the first place.
Yeah, so I'm joined every day by my two of my best friends, Simon Grunewald and Josh Fuster, and then we have a new guest on every single day from the fantasy community. We started doing it started as a podcast in March 2020. At the time, we were building a trade negotiation platform. And we were getting into the industry. Simon and I have been full time. Josh wanted to get involved, and we thought a great way to do that was by starting doing a podcast. Nick Ercolano from Big Dogs Gotta Eat actually urged me. He's like, you should start creating content while you're building the product. And so we weren't sure whether like what kind of content we wanted to create, if it was going to be like trading focused, since that was the product, or if it was going to be something else. So we were playing around with a few things, and one of them was this just idea that we had, and it was actually poll perception. That was like the first game we played. It was like our kind of our original game, and that was all we played on the podcast. It was like once a week, sort of ish. It took so long to edit that sometimes we just like would wait and it wouldn't come out every week. And then I actually found DGN that summer. I found out about DGN. I remember walking Rosie and listening to. It must have been like Russ, and I remember Casey Kasem, I think, was on there.
Yeah, she's
can't remember who else. Yeah, and I just remember listening to that one and listening to Kasem. Like, wow, this is kind of similar to what we're doing. And then we ended up moving to a live stream at the suggestion of Nando DeFino from The Athletic. He was like, you got to get on YouTube, like you got to build that way, and so we switched to that, and that sort of was like the genesis of the fantasy football game show.
I love how John Luke's just casually just name dropping all these people that helped him guide which way to go. And all
I'm sitting on the shoulders of giants here. I can't take credit for a lot of these ideas because a lot of it was from advice. It's like
It was just really so organic though, so natural. Like just like, oh, these are my friends.
I know.
Yeah,
Love it.
Yeah, I remember one time I was having a conversation with Jay on. He's like, "Yeah, I was on the phone with Scott Fish the other day, and it's like, oh yeah, that's nice."
Scott's my man. Scott's my man. If you would have told me like a year and a half ago that Scott is like a good, probably one of my closest friends in the industry, I would have been like, "What? You're kidding me? Like, comes and watches our show every day? That's stupid."
But yeah, the game show stuff, the YouTube, the live stream is awesome. I've been lucky enough to be on there a couple times, beating your guys' asses a couple times.
Yeah, every single time. It's not so much of an achievement, Rocky. We're very
that
dumb.
is true. Yeah,
it's very easy.
Yeah, it was funny. The first time I was on, it was my birthday, and the three of them sang "Happy Birthday" to me. It was the worst thing I've ever heard.
Oh yeah, we actually stopped doing that for like 10 months, and then we just brought it back this past Friday because Tim, Simon and my best friend, we were all like three best friends from college. Tim is always on our Fun Friday. Anyone who's watched our show knows Tim. He's zany Tim, and it was his birthday, so for his birthday we sang, and it was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
I'm sure perfect harmonies.
Yes, every time.
Okay, we'll get right into some of the injury and news stuff we wanted to talk about. The first thing is this actually happened prior to the games, but after our last show. So Chris Carson has season-ending neck surgery. think it was called disc fusion surgery, which does not sound good. So yeah, so he's done for the year. And I guess the first question I have is Chris Carson's dynasty value pretty much dust at this point? Do you even think he's coming back? Like 27, 28-year-old with neck surgery?
I'll jump in here and say maybe. That's not helpful at all. Hang on, let me clarify. It's possible, but unlikely. How about that? Is that better? Like I just traded away Chris Carson in one league. It was a big 3-way trade, like a first time 3-person trade in our home dynasty league, where I sent Josh Jacobs and Chris Carson and a 23 first, and I got back Eckler and Julio and a 22 third or something like that. And I was just like, I just want Carson off my team. You know, like I just don't think there's any real value there. I'm again, rewind the clock to about 5 weeks ago. I was all on the Chris Carson train. Even when he got hurt, I'm like, buy him. He's the guy. If he's having season ending neck surgery, I'm worried. I'm really worried. There is a potential that he never plays again. And I hate to say that, but there is a potential in this league, in this time, in this day and age, and on that team that he never plays it down again. I am out. I am done. And I think if you can send a 4th and get him back, sure, right? Like something that doesn't matter. But and I feel bad because I like Chris Carson, the player. I think he got a bad rap. He was a great value, but RIP. I just think he's done. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm with you, Andrew. I mean, just without the season-ending neck surgery, a guy at his age, I think, was going to have very little value in terms of trading or in ADP and things like that in Dynasty. And production was probably going to be iffy after this. Like I said, I think there's a chance he doesn't even play again. And I'm not really interested in even at a 4th. I mean, I guess maybe I throw a 4th because 4ths are worthless pretty much, but that's about it. But JL, any thoughts? Do you have any interest in Alex Collins going forward? He has not produced very well, so he's the next man up there. And it has been for a little while.
For contenders this year, absolutely, there's interest in Alex Collins. I'm not trading for him. I'm not investing any sort of long-term value or hope into Alex Collins. I'm a Ravens fan. I've watched him when he was here in Baltimore. He's decent. I don't think he is a great running back. This season, I'm fine rolling him in my teams, my lineups, but going forward after that, not so much.
Yeah, and I'm a little worried. Even I have him on some rush. I got him early in the season before Carson was hurt, actually, because I'll sometimes pick up backup guys that I think have a chance, and it worked out with him. But even having him on a bunch of rosters, I feel like I rarely feel confident enough to start him. So it's tough rolling him out there, even now.
The other thing is that we don't know what that team is going to do next year at the running back position, right? Yes. Like it's not Carson, it's not Penny. I don't think. Who is it going to be? Like if it was DeAndre Swift and Chris Carson, he'd be dead 3 weeks ago, right? Like it's just like who cares? But it could be Carson. Like that's kind of what gives him that optimistic hope. It's what gives you that like he's worth a 4th kind of logic, right? Where it's like we don't know who it's going to be. It could be this guy. Like it could be, we don't know what's in the box. It could be a boat. Like it's the same thing. Like we don't know so I think that's part of why it's so confusing. It's not obvious. It's not Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson and Chris Carson. It's not Joe Mixon and Chris Carson. Like it could be his job, but I'm not willing to risk it. I'm done. I'm out.
Or it could be Isaiah Spiller.
Yeah. Yeah. There actually are a couple rookies that could be. Yeah. CJ Spiller. That would be bad.
That would be interesting. Okay.
I'm out.
The other prominent injury we had to talk about was to a running back as well. Michael Carter, guy I liked a lot. He was my RB4 from this class after the big 3 names. He's shown a little bit here. He's good in the passing game. So he's going to be out for a little bit, though. So we got Tevin Coleman and Ty Johnson basically replacing him. Again, any interest in these replacements? Ty Johnson has had some value this year. What do you think, JL? Are you just avoiding the Jets altogether because Zach Wilson's coming back?
Definitely avoiding the Jets. He's still on the Jets, but I mean, I think Ty Johnson is worth being rostered just for the flex value in the next coming weeks.
And Andrew, Is this? Are you? What are your thoughts on Carter? I mean, is this maybe while he's not getting points for people, is this a buy low opportunity? Because like I said, I don't think he ever has real true RB1 potential, but I like him as a guy that can be a solid RB2 for you for a few years here, and then until the Jets move on to the next big thing.
Well, I like to say that the context matters, right? The context is everything. And I think, honestly, the context with Carter matters a lot. If the guy that has Carter in your league drafted him 8-9 months ago, they're not getting rid of him now, right? Like if they took him then, they trusted him then, they maybe they got him in the mid-second or something. Maybe they got lucky and they got good value on him. They're not trading him now because they know this value is low. They know this value is not the time to trade him. So what I think your only real chance to buy low on Carter is on someone who has traded for him or traded to get him in the last couple of weeks to try to make a playoff push and it didn't work out, right? Somebody who's like, hey, I need to go all in. I'm going to trade some picks or something for Michael Carter, and now he's hurt, and now I'm freaking out again. I got to pivot to somebody else. That's really, I think, your only chance to buy Carter light or to buy Carter low, because I think if you're gonna send an offer for Carter, it's going to have to be a good offer. I mean, he's still a rookie. He's still in an offense that has a lot of upside and a lot of potential. But I mean, I don't know. I don't mind kicking the tires. How many times do I say it, right? Send the offer. You never know, right? Send an option. See what you can do, right? Send something and see what the manager is. Maybe they're fed up. Maybe they're out. You never know. But I mean, I'm willing to try for sure. But man, I don't know. He worries me this year for sure because of the injury. And if I can't trust him this year, I don't know if I can trust him next year because everything is so in flux for running backs. It's just, I don't know. It makes me a little nervous.
That's a good point. And especially it's hard to trust anybody with the Jets. And like I said, I'd almost feel better if Zach Wilson was out for the rest of the year.
I agree.
Because every other quarterback has performed pretty well except Zach Wilson.
Especially with the running backs. My goodness.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus. Like Mike White, the other was
White
against the Bengals, against my home team, right?
Machine,
Dicking off everything. Like 20 passes to the running backs. Like, that's awesome. But Zach Wilson ain't going to do that.
Speaking with Peng's picks in the chats, that Ocho Cinco display is nice, Andrew.
Thanks.
Oh, it's signed too. Hooday. Great.
And then there was also a couple of contract pieces of news this week. Dallas Goddard is extended. I believe it was 4 years, $57 million. I'm not sure the exact guaranteed money. I think it was in the 30s somewhere. We talked a little bit about Goddard on the last show last week, Andrew. So I'll throw this one to JL. What are your thoughts now that you know that on Goddard as a dynasty asset? Now that he's tied to the Eagles for the next several years, and looks like Jalen Hurts may be his quarterback for the next, at least I think into next year. I think he's playing his way, and they're winning their way into Hurts getting himself another year. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah, Goddard has looked very good. They traded away Ertz to the Cardinals, as everyone knows. I was just looking. I haven't looked at the updated target shares this week, but for last week, Goddard has seen one of the biggest jumps in target share amongst all players, fantasy players, so skill position players. And so that what that tells to me is that they are confident in Goddard going forward. Contract reinforces that. I'm very bullish on Goddard. I think he definitely works his way up into that to me that tier 3 of tight ends.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we had talked about last week. That I think we all agreed. Me, Andrew, and Scott. He's not here tonight. That it's hard to see him ever working his way up into that real difference maker tier like a Kelsey or a Waller. But that he's definitely kind of like you said, sort of in a tier 3, probably below. He's right as definitely right now. He's below guys like Andrews. What Pitts, I guess, what we expect him to be, and so. I do just give me a little more confidence that he's now there, because when we talked about him last week, we were all kind of a little iffy, and part of that was the uncertainty about his future, not whether he'd be with the Eagles. And as I said, even if he was with the Eagles, who his quarterback would be. And I do think now, I think we probably know it's Hurts next year. Obviously, things can change. But I do like him a little more. And the targets there, I think, are pretty concentrated with him and Devontae. There's not a lot of options, at least right now. They will have some cap space next year once his number will come off the books. And if Hurts is the quarterback, they won't be paying pretty much anything for a quarterback. So that'll help a lot too. But any thoughts on Goddard, Andrew?
I totally agree with what JL said. He's in that third tier because the fourth tier is everyone else, right? Like tight end is such a weird thing. Like the first tier is Kelsey. Second tier is kind of, and again, this is up for debate. First tier is Kelsey. Second tier is kind of like Waller, Andrews, maybe Hawkinson. I know it depends if he steps up. Maybe Pitts, right? He's in that. Like we got to see. That third tier is kind of like that Goddard, Gesicki, Irv Smith, maybe like some of these guys that you like, Troutman, like these names you've heard of, but they're not really doing anything. And the fourth tier is just everyone else. So like that's not exhaustive. There are plenty of names I'm not listing, but I think that's kind of where I don't mind having a third tier tight end in a system where there are really only 3 tiers, right? And there are so few tight end ones. I don't mind starting Goddard every week. I really don't. And I think it is a risk. There is some. See, Dave gets it, but like there are some risks with starting a guy like Goddard on an offense like the Eagles, where you don't know what you're going to get. They could run for 6 touchdowns and pass for 8 yards, right? Like who knows what you're getting with that team. And Hurts, I do believe, is going to be the quarterback, and that helps Goddard. And the contract signing shows you that the team cares about Goddard, which is helpful. So like all of this lines up to be like, is he tight end 8, tight end 9? I totally get that. But in the world where there are 3 or 4 tight ends that are really worth starting and everyone else is kind of like a jumble, is it great? I don't know, but it's better than it could be. It's better than starting Dawson Knox every week and just praying for a touchdown, right? Like at least he's going to get volume. So yeah, I mean, like we said before, I like him. I don't love him, but if he steps up and becomes Hurts' main target and becomes the Darren Waller of this offense, he could be a beast. So I'm on board. Sure.
Yeah, and I think Toronto Dave in the chat did say it best. He's basically an every week starter, but not elite. And I don't know that he ever gets to elite, but he's a guy you can plug in every week and not really worry about the position, I think. And if you don't want to play up for that,
well, you don't love it. You don't love it. You're not excited about starting Goddard, but you're looking at it like, well, it's better than Logan Thomas. It's better than, some weeks Dalton Schultz. Like, better than some.
Yeah, and Maria. JL's girlfriend's in the chat, so only here so JL won't fire her.
That's true. Parroting what Joey said, and they're both very much correct. I run an authoritarian ship over there.
And then the other big contract news this week, which was bizarre to me, is first the Denver Broncos extend Tim Patrick, which was like, okay, whatever. Tim Patrick, he's a nice little player. He is a good NFL wide receiver. Not always as great for fantasy, but and it was a decent sized contract. I think it was about $10 million a year. And then I actually posted in a chat. I believe it was a chat, maybe the group chat I'm in with JL actually, that I think this means that they're not keeping Sutton. and then like 3 days later, they extend Sutton to an even bigger contract, which
yep.
I don't get throwing all this money at the wide receivers. I mean, if you have Sutton, you already have Judy and you have Patrick. Why do you need to extend Sutton when he's going to be? You have Fant, Alberto, who's shown just as much as Fant has in much more limited opportunities, I believe. So, Andrew, what do you make of all this?
Well, easy answer is I have no freaking clue what this team is doing, right? But I get the logic too, though. Like these are good players. You want good players on your team. So I totally get the logic of like locking these guys down. And again, I'm not a contract expert. From what I've seen, both of these contracts for Tim Patrick and Courtland Sutton you could argue anyway, were lower than what they might have gotten on the free agency market. Like they're lower than what Kansas City or Pittsburgh or Green Bay might have paid for them. So maybe it's the logic of, well, if we sign them and take a discount on them and see how we can grow the team. Look at it this way. Denver doesn't have to look at receivers or even running backs really for the next 2 or 3 years, right? Like they can build everything else. They've got the receivers locked in. They do need a quarterback. I think we all agree that is one of their weakest positions on offense. And so now it frees them up to say, okay, we don't need to worry about these other positions. We've got Fant, we've got Judy, we've got Sutton, we've got Patrick, we've got the guys locked in. Now we just got to get a quarterback that can get them the ball. And so maybe there's some logic there where it's like, hey, let's go get these guys signed for what we believe to be less than market value. And this is kind of what we do in Dynasty, right? Where you trade for players for value more than production, where it's like, this is a good deal. Why wouldn't I take this? Like, you want me to just send a second for Sutton? I'll take that. Do I need a receiver? No, but that's great value, and I might be able to flip them for something later. Maybe they're listening to us, right? Maybe the Denver Broncos are listening to the Dynasty players and are like, that's a good idea. Why don't we do that? So I don't know. I mean, Long story short, I am still looking at Sutton. I am still looking at Patrick, even really, as potential buy candidates. Anytime you get a receiver locked down, that's somebody I want because they're most likely not going anywhere. Maybe you can get them on the cheap from somebody who's like fed up with their production. But in Dynasty, especially in rebuilds, that's who you're looking for. Somebody who's going to be there for the long haul, not going to have a lot of chaos in their life. Maybe that's a good thing. I don't know.
See, it's funny for me. This actually makes me worry a little more about Sutton now that I know he's staying in Denver. A couple of reasons.
Okay.
The quarterback situation, which there's definitely rumors there could be upgrades there next year. But even if they move on from Teddy, if they don't get a Rodgers and they move on to a rookie, that doesn't excite me either. And the other thing is being opposite Judy. I mean, maybe it's just Teddy, or maybe it's what the front office wants or what the coaching staff wants. But it seems like every time they play together, Judy's getting peppered and Sutton's barely getting anything. So what are your thoughts on this, JL? Sutton, is it a good thing that he's locked up, or is it a bad thing that he's in Denver?
Yes, is my answer to that.
Good analysis.
Yeah,
I like that.
It is funny that Denver is giving so much money to someone they barely give any targets to. I'm hoping that changes, but I don't know that this it's necessarily good or bad for Sutton, because it's like Schrodinger's cat, right? Like, we don't know where he would have gone if he wasn't in Denver. It could have been worse. It's fine for Courtland Sutton, and it's good that he's locked up. It's good, go get paid, Courtland Sutton. I'm cool with that. But yeah, I do think that the Broncos need to figure out their QB situation. They need to figure out their entire offensive situation.
Yeah, it's not every week we get a Schrodinger's cat reference on Dynasty Junkies. I appreciate that, John Luke.
Totally got that reference, though. That was exactly right. Like, we don't know what he could have been. He honestly, he might have stayed in Denver anyway. And so this is all kind of moot. But the fact that it was 1 week after, not even 1 week, actually, after the Patrick signing, it kind of, I think you put it perfectly, Rocky. As soon as Patrick signed, everyone was like, whoa, there goes Sutton. They're not going to sign. They signed Sutton. Okay, now I don't know what to do. Like, it was this weird, because it was within a week, it made it extra confusing,
Yeah. Okay, so that pretty much finishes up all the injury and news stuff we had for this week. It wasn't a lot going on. Thankfully, there weren't any crazy major injuries this past weekend. So we're going to get into what we wanted to do. The main thrust of the show this week was talk about some late season trade targets. Basically, guys you might be looking for down the stretch here to acquire in dynasty leagues. Assuming most of us, I think, did it from a contender's point of view. Rebuilds, I think it's generally kind of the same thing all the time. You want young guys, you want rookies, you want picks, and you want injured players. So go do that if you're rebuilding. But we're talking about some specific players we like going forward here to kind of purchase down the stretch to help you win those titles. So I guess I'll go first with one of the ones I came up with, which was Miles Sanders. I kind of some guys at different price points here, I feel like, and Miles Sanders is probably the cheapest. He came back this week, didn't go crazy for fantasy or anything, but had a nice little game if you watched him. He looked good. He looked healthy, and the Eagles as a team are running the ball like crazy. Ever since the Lions game about 4 weeks ago, it's basically been what they do. They kind of done a total 180 here, where Sirianni was having Hurts throw the ball all over the field, and obviously he was not looking good doing that. People were talking about him getting benched at that point, possibly, and he flipped the script, and it's kind of become their identity. Just this past week, they faced the Saints, who were the number one run defense in the league, and ran for like 240 yards on them, and they just keep running it no matter who they're playing, no matter. They've been lucky that most of these game scripts have been favorable for them to do so. But I kind of feel like unless they're getting blown out, you're going to see it's at least a 50-50 split pretty much. So he should get volume. Howard getting hurt helps that also, who's got banged up this week. Doesn't look like he's going to play at least in week 12. Maybe, I don't know the extent of it going forward, but that only helps this even more. I mean, Gainwell will probably be back involved. Scott will be back involved. But even this past week, it was a lot more Sanders than Howard until the second half, when maybe they wanted to use Howard as the hammer a little bit towards the end. He's more of a downhill runner. So I really like it. I think this is the cheapest you've probably been able to get Miles Sanders in Dynasty since he was drafted. So I don't know that it costs you more than a late first at this point. I mean, he really has not produced a lot. He's coming off an injury. I think there are some people who are just ready to get out on him. So Andrew, what do you think of that one?
Well, I'll put it this way. Miles Sanders is one of those guys I've been trying to get on a couple specific teams that I need that kind of RB2 kind of option all year. And I feel like you're exactly right. Now might be your best chance because he came back. He was injured. So a lot of people were like, well, he's injured. He'll be back. I'm not going to sell him low. And then he came back and he didn't really dominate, right? He wasn't like awesome on the stat sheet, which is what a lot of people look at. I think he did well. He didn't do great. And I think there is potential for him to do better as he comes back out of this injury. So if I'm contending, and again, that's kind of where we're going with this. If I'm contending and let's say I had Derrick Henry and Javonte Williams, and now I'm out Derrick Henry and Javonte is my RB1 or something where it's like, my whole world has shifted from where I was at in week 6. Miles Sanders is a prime target for me to send, like a late first, right? Like, let's see what it can get done. Let's see what we can do. So I love that logic. And I think too, with Miles Sanders on that team, as much as you hate to say it, he could be one of those guys that is very boom or bust. And as we go down the stretch here, those guys are valuable in a certain regard. If your team is very blah, then Miles Sanders is the perfect addition because he is very not blah, right? He is very much a 3 touchdowns or 3 touches. We don't know what we're getting with that guy. And so part of me is like, I like getting Sanders for the right price. If I'm a contender, let me go all in. Let me see what I can do. But I'm not going to overpay for him, right? Where I'm not going to like spend crazy and just go send the house. No. Let me see what I can get. Let me get reasonable with this. But at the same time, I do like that pick. And I thought that was a good choice of yours by putting him on there.
Yeah, I agreed. You're not going to pay a ton for him. That's part of the reason I like him is I think you can get him fairly cheap. I mean, you could try. There may be people out there do it for a second or two
right
at this point. So, and the other thing that's going to be a little bit of a theme of the guys I came up with is he's got a very nice schedule down the stretch as well.
Very
Giants,
nice.
Jets. Football team who's decent against the run, but should at least have positive probably game scripts, and they're not going to get blown out by the football team. Even if they happen to lose to Washington, I don't think they're getting blown out. So they'll be able to run anytime they want probably in that game. It's just a matter of how effective it is. So JL, if you have any thoughts on Miles Sanders, you can give them, and then you can go into one of yours.
Yeah, I mentioned Miles Sanders in our stream as a buy low candidate earlier in the season. Long term, Dynasty, I'm not super confident in Miles Sanders. I wasn't super confident going into this season. I think he is a good buy low candidate just for the fact that I think he'll keep getting opportunities. It seems like the Eagles offense is pretty dedicated to giving him those opportunities. Sirianni heard everybody complaining, that what are you doing? What are you doing with your running back usage here? And he came out of the gate giving him a bunch of carries this past week. I see someone mentioned in the chat he did fumble, but then Jordan Howard got hurt, so he came right back to Miles Sanders. I think that he's still a good value at this point, but I'm not super bullish on his long-term value.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I don't think I think he has some value going forward. But yeah, I mean, I'm not expecting him to jump into the RB1 tier or anything like that. But
where do you think he's drafted in Dynasty startup leagues next year?
Man, 8th round, 4th round, it literally could be anywhere, right? Like
I was thinking like 5th-ish area, 5th, 6th. I'm thinking super flex. So
I'm just saying there are some drafts, there are some leagues I'm in where Sanders is worth nothing. And then there are some where he is an RB2, like an actual value. So I like that 5th, 6th, but like there are leagues I'm sure he'd go in the 8th. It'd be weird. You know what I mean? Like, how did he last this long? Because everyone's like, I don't want him.
And J Mike's in the chat saying starting Miles Sanders and trusting Sirianni is terrifying.
J Mike just following me around tonight.
I don't totally disagree with that, but I think the one thing you can trust is Sirianni is going to run the hell out of the ball at this point, which is amazing. That I feel like I'm amazed that I'm saying that because he had a game literally like 6 weeks ago where the running backs got 3 carries the entire game, which is unheard of. He's just, like I said, he's just watching. I watch the Eagles every week. I'm an Eagles fan, and it's just they just run the ball. It's like I said, every chance they can get, they just it's what they do now. It's like become their identity. So, Jay, why do you want to give? Yeah, and that's the other thing. It is working. They've won 3 out of the last 4, and the other one was a 3-point loss to a pretty decent Chargers team. But I keep trying to throw it to JL, and I keep getting sidetracked. So Andrew, stop doing that. No, but JL, what do you think? Who's another guy you want to go after?
So another trade target for me is DJ Moore. I feel like DJ Moore's dynasty value, while it probably doesn't take a huge hit this season, it's taken somewhat of a hit. His target share is astronomical, yet it just hasn't converted to fantasy production this season. He's dealing with quarterback issues, right? Sam Darnold, nobody is happy with Sam Darnold, especially not Robbie Anderson. And Cam Newton, we saw him throw that touchdown to DJ Moore, but it wasn't a ton of targets to go around with Cam Newton this past weekend. And I think a lot of people are expecting that to be the case going forward. Cam Newton is a very much a run heavy quarterback, as most people know. So I think DJ Moore is a great dynasty buy low candidate. I think he'll have many, many good seasons. I think he's a top tier talent as a wide receiver, and that his value will only go up in coming years.
Yeah, I agree. I love DJ Moore. I have for a long time, and the talent's always been there. I just wish he could get a quarterback like you said. Maybe Cam can help a little, but he's going to run, so probably not going to help DJ Moore that much. Not going to be as maybe a little better targets than what he was getting from Sam Darnold, but we'll see how it goes. I always wish if DJ Moore just had more touchdowns this past few seasons, I think he would be regarded so differently. And I think a lot of that's on the quarterback, not DJ Moore. But Andrew, why don't you get into one of yours?
Well, I want to say real quick, DJ Moore is a great pick here because I think that's one of those guys that whoever has DJ Moore has ridden that roller coaster all year and might be ready to get off of it. And so like that's one of those things you always got to look at with these buy low or whatever you want to call it, like trade target options, right? Where it's like, is the person who has that player fed up? Maybe, right? DJ Moore is a prime case of that. The one I actually didn't put on the sheet, but I wanted to bring up during this, and I didn't put it specifically because of, well, it's in my trade later, but TJ Hawkinson, right? Like he's one of those guys, and especially in tight end premium leagues, a lot of people are still remembering that goose egg that TJ Hawkinson laid 2 weeks ago, where it's like he didn't do anything. And how can I be an elite tight end if I'm not even getting a target or if I'm not even catching the ball? And so I think TJ Hawkinson is one of those guys, especially if you're a contender, you might be a little bit surprised at the price, right? Hawkinson could be going for, who knows, 2 firsts. He could be going for 2 seconds. And the price on those two differences is huge, right? Like that's a massive value difference. And I think it's worth kicking the tires, right? Like, let's go see, especially in tight end premium. Let's go see what the guy has. Again, we get into it more later, so I don't want to ruin the whole ending of this. But I think TJ Hawkins is one of those guys that I know you're high on, Rocky. I know you're a big fan, as am I. But I mean, do you consider, I guess maybe that's a better way to put it, do you consider TJ Hawkinson a buy low or a hold? If you have TJ Hawkinson, are you ready to get off that train, or is it more like, I'm just going to ride it out?
Oh, no, he's definitely a hold. It's sort of like DJ Moore to the nth degree in that it's a quarterback issue. And again, TJ Hawkinson is super talented. He has been, other than that game with Goff a couple weeks ago where they threw for like 40 yards in regulation or something like that. He has been a target hog. He only got the 1 target that game, but he's been get peppered the rest of the week. So I have no worries about his talent. He's the kind of tight end who I think even when they get some better talent around him is still going to be a top 2 target on his team, which is what you're looking for to hopefully get into that elite tier. So I'm hoping, and maybe I just jumped a year early on TJ Hawkinson because I said he would get to that elite tier this year. That's clearly not happening. But maybe if they can get a legit quarterback in there next year, maybe even one of these rookies will, it's hard to believe anybody wouldn't be an upgrade other than, Tim Boyle wouldn't be an upgrade from Jared Goff. So, I'm still big on the Hawkinson train. Definitely buying him low if people are doing it because of the dip. And I have probably at least 10 shares of TJ Hawkinson. I haven't been trying to sell any of them. So.
No, and that's kind of why I was asking, like, as someone who has a lot of Hawkinson, you're not ready to get off that train, right? And that's kind of where it comes down to. With DJ Moore, you might. With Hawkinson, most people are not. And so I put him on here as a target, but it's still going to cost an actual price for Hawkinson. Like in most leagues, again, I'm generalizing here. There are some leagues where a guy might have Kelsey and Hawkinson, or you might have Waller and Hawkinson, right? And he's like, hey, you know what? I'll give up Hawkinson because I've already got a tight end. That's about your only chance. Other than that, yeah, I don't think a lot of people are off that train just yet. He's a long-term asset, and you're not going to sell short.
Jordan in the chat said, I heard Rocky and big fan, and my YouTube page went to James Robinson highlights. I am a big James Robinson guy. I just wanted to mention that too, because he's not on any of our lists, but I like him too, especially because you can get him fairly cheap, and he's just going to produce week after week. I just bought him for a 23 first in a league, which got killed on Twitter, by the way, 87-13 in favor of the first. Because we always poll the trades in all my leagues after they're made. So
people hate winning titles. I don't know what to tell you. Like they always like them picks. I don't know.
I thought that was when I sent it, I didn't think he was going to do it for a single first, even the vaunted 23 class. So, but I was very happy with it anyway. So, just figured I'd throw that out there since it was mentioned in the chat. So, Andrew, you haven't given one of yours yet.
Well, so the one I wanted to bring up for sure was Mark Ingram. I think if I'm contending, Mark Ingram is one of those guys that is almost dirt cheap, really. And we've seen Alvin Kamara struggle a little bit this year before he was injured. Now he's injured. What's the reason to run him out there and like pound him into the ground? This team isn't going anywhere. And he's really the best player left after Michael Thomas hit the bench. I mean, I don't know why Sean Payton would say, hey, Alvin Kamara, let me give you 8 targets and 20 runs a game. What's the point of that? Like what? I just don't see the benefit on an NFL level. So for me, if I'm contending and I don't have Mark Ingram on my roster, I'm sending a second or a third or whatever, a third and a player, right? Like third and Gabriel Davis from Mark Ingram. I bet you can get that done. I'll bet you can get, especially if the other team isn't a contender, which again, at this time of year, you kind of get into that wishy-washy idea of like, well, who's selling him? Is it going to be a contender is probably not selling Mark Ingram because they're buying him and all this. So again, not every league, but Mark Ingram is one of those guys that I think can put up 10 to 12 points per week in your flex and dominate. And no one is talking about him because he's Mark Ingram and he's back on New Orleans and he's not a flashy name. And dude, I'm telling you right now, Mark Ingram could win titles for people. And to me, that is much more important than having a second round pick that could be worthless. Does anybody remember Amari Rodgers, De'Ami Brown, all these players in the second round that did nothing this year and might do something next year? Maybe, who knows? Listen, I could trade Mark Ingram for Amari Rodgers easy right now. Like if you're a contender and you have Amari Rodgers, you don't want Amari Rodgers. You want Mark Ingram, right? Like if you're going for the title, you want Mark Ingram. That's the guy you want on your bench. If you've got guys like Josh Jacobs and he gets hurt, Mark Ingram is a perfect example to throw in there. So that's someone that I'm trying to get in every contending league I can that I don't already have him. I just think he's so dirt cheap. Why not? Like it's just an easy win.
And you think even with Kamara back, he's still going to be
even with Kamara back, because again, I don't think they're going to lean on Kamara like we're used to seeing. And I think this is the and I hate to say this because it sounds negative, but maybe this is the end of the run for Kamara as the bell cow back, only because that NFL team doesn't need to lean on Kamara like they used to, right? You used to have Drew Brees, Alvin Kamara, and Michael Thomas. That offense flowed. Now what? You're going to have Simeon and Kamara and Callaway. I mean, like the team is different. It's entirely different. So part of me says too, are we even sure Kamara is going to see the field every week for the rest of the year? I'm not. And there are definitely weeks where if Kamara sits, Ingram is the guy with 20 carries. Like, what the hell? Like, put him in the lineup. Put him in your flex. If you've got 3 or 4 running backs ahead of him, that's the exact guy I want to bench if I've got better options. Because I think, too, as we go down the stretch, you're going to see more injuries. We're going to see more people wear out and get tired and whatever. And, like, Ingram is the perfect person to have as a backup. If you're not having to start him, sign me up. I'm not worried about it. No.
Yeah, and Kamara, I mean, hasn't really had to be a bell cow until this year, really. They hadn't really been running them the way they were this year. So they're probably, I mean, that's probably why they traded for him is to get him back to that, maybe we'll get you 8 to 10 targets, but we're only going to run you like 8 to 12 times a game at most. So,
bingo.
So yeah, and Ingram could definitely get some goal line work. Not that Kamara, Mr. 6 TDs from last year can't punch it in at the goal line, but definitely I can see them using Ingram in that role as well to ease the wear and tear. So, JL, any thoughts on Ingram there?
Yeah, long term, I think they'll like. I mean, we've seen Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara before in this offense. I don't think that that Mark Ingram will affect Alvin Kamara too much when Alvin Kamara is healthy. But Mark Ingram is I think back to his high value backup / maybe even flex worthy type of play in this New Orleans Saints offense with not many weapons.
Yep, and yeah, and I agree with Andrew. I think he can, he can be valuable in that role, and if he gets you a touchdown, it can be a really nice week. So, and he'll get enough that he still gives you something otherwise.
One other thing I think too is as we get into the end of this season, running backs are going to matter a lot more to contending teams, right? Like running backs almost always end up winning you titles. And again, I'm overgeneralizing here, but in most leagues that I'm in, when I get to down the stretch, it's the running backs that put me over the top. It's the running backs that make it like a championship team versus a contending team. And there is a difference. So for me, Mark Ingram is one of those guys that I'd rather have him on my bench than on my opponent's starting lineup. That's really what it comes down to, right? Like just put him on my team. I don't care what it takes.
Yeah, and my next guy is kind of along the Sanders line from earlier. He's actually in the same draft class as Sanders in his third year here. David Montgomery. He's a guy I feel like that we're kind of perennially underrating at this point. We kind of just managed to downplay what he did last year when he finished as like a top 5 running back. And he started off this year pretty nice, had the injury, hasn't been great since he came back, but he's clearly getting the entire workload. And this is almost a repeat of what happened last year. Everybody talked about one of the reasons we downplayed his finish last year is that he had this great schedule down the stretch and he took advantage of it. Well, this year he's got, I'm looking at it. And this is per MFL's rankings. I don't know where they pull their rankings of, defenses, but he has, 12, 13, 6 opponents, left going to week 17. All but one, the Packers, are in the bottom half of the league in rush defense. All but 2 are in the bottom 10. So he's set up for great success here. I believe I heard somewhere he had 95% of the running back touches this past week. So Khalil Herbert is not a threat. I was worried about Herbert when Montgomery came back from the injury, but it does not seem to be an issue. Damian Williams is not an issue. So the only issue really to worry about is that Bears offense and Matt Nagy, but there's rumors he may get fired. So there you go. So if that happens, it might be even better for David Montgomery. So JL, any thoughts on Montgomery that you can go into another trade target?
I think he's a great trade target. I think he's the volume of work tells me that they trust him. And I do think he's a talented running back. And I think we're starting to see them really lean on him. He's more of a workhorse back than I think a lot of running backs in the NFL.
Okay, who's your next guy, JL?
So my next guy, who I have here, is J.K. Dobbins. This is a really easy one. I think where a lot of leagues are probably approaching the trade deadline. J.K. Dobbins to me is a great trade target where a lot of people are going to forget about him. A lot of people don't they don't have that recency bias. They haven't thought about him in a while. He's been sitting in their IR, and I think he's a great guy to target. See if you can get him before this trade deadline so that you set yourself up for next season.
Right. Yeah. So that would be one of those rebuilding ones, and I totally agree. I love Dobbins as a potential trade target. Me and Andrew Cohn, a team that got kind of driven into the ground by me and my former co-host last season, and we picked up a ton of picks, stripped it to the bones. And then Dobbins is a guy I tried to go after and couldn't get, for some of our picks that we built up here. But Andrew, any thoughts on Dobbins? And then let's get your next one.
Yeah, the only thing I would say about Dobbins, I think that this is one of those cases where the injury might have helped his value. It kind of insulated it a little bit. Like whatever his value was when he got hurt is kind of what his value is still, which is rare in a way. I don't think he took a hit at all with the injury, which is, again, not something you see all the time. But I still think you're gonna have a hard time getting him off of another team for less than a first plus, because they spent a first on him. They saw what he can do. He didn't, fall apart. He wasn't terrible. He wasn't like, Trey Sermon, for lack of a better term. He wasn't a N'Keal Harry, right? He wasn't one of those bust players. He did well, and he will be back next year on a team that likes to run the ball. So I feel like you're going to have to pay a lot to get him, but on a rebuilding team, you might have a couple of things that you could send that's worth it to whoever has the Dobbins on their roster. And I say the Dobbins, but like whoever has Dobbins on their roster. If you've got someone in your league that is contending or is kind of in the middle or is going to make the playoffs and is kind of like maybe I contend, maybe I don't, and they've got Dobbins, maybe you send a trade, for something like Miles Sanders plus, and you say, hey, Dobbins isn't scoring you points at all. I, as a rebuilder, would love to have Dobbins on my team because he's not scoring points. A lot of leagues will actually punish you in a way, but like if you're scoring points, you lose your draft position, and there's rankings that come into play. So I would love to get Dobbins on my team. So I'm 100% on board with this pick. I think it's a terrific option. And at the same time, he might not be as expensive as he was in August before the injury. There is still a potential that he could have a little bit of a discount because he's not scoring points. But as a rebuilder, even as a contender, to be honest, I'd very happily send, that 112, that late first for Dobbins. I'd much rather have Dobbins on my roster than probably whoever I'm going to get at that 112 in this next draft class. So I think even as a contender, I don't mind making this kind of move. You know what I mean? It's a little different, but I'm with you. I think it makes sense.
Okay, before we move on to your next guy, Andrew, we have a question in the chat here from the Dynasty Hot Sauce Pod. I'm going to assume this is Larry, or it could be Justin, I guess. I don't know. But considering Zach Wilson's in there, I feel like it's Larry. Zach Wilson, it's a 16-team Superflex, 1.25 tight end premium, start 11. So a lot going on here. Zach Wilson, Alexander Madison, Devin Singletary, or 108 Brandon Ayuk, and I guess that's Tony Jones. So either you guys have any thoughts on this one?
I'll let you go first, JL. What do you think?
Zach Wilson for Madison, Singletary, 108 Ayuk, and Tony Jones. This is a tough one. I think I would rather have the 108 and Ayuk and Tony Jones, actually. It's going to depend a little bit on your QBs. 16 team.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough in 16.
Well, it entirely depends on your roster. This is one of those that in a vacuum makes no sense. Why would you do any of these? Like, I could see both sides of this. But if your team has enough quarterbacks, I love sending 108 and Ayuk for a starting quarterback. I don't mind that at all. But if your team is loaded at quarterback and could use some youth and you're not really sure if Zach Wilson's the answer, I totally get the logic of sending Zach Wilson. It literally, this is one of those trades that I hate saying it, but like context is everything, and we don't have enough of it, in my opinion.
Yeah, my initial reaction is with what actually JL said is I'd rather have the 108 Ayuk side. I'm not even a big Ayuk guy, but he's been showing a little more here since Shanahan let him out of the doghouse, and I've been pretty vocal in my distaste for Zach Wilson. The only thing is, obviously in a 16-teamer, if you only have like Zach Wilson, another guy, you can't do this. So
that's why I'm with Dave here. I'm going the QB side in Wilson, right? Dave's just commenting here. Like, I think in a 16-teamer, Ayuk is, remember 3 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, whatever it was, we were hating on Ayuk. Like he was getting nothing. 108 in this draft might not be that great. It might be a quarterback. We don't know. There's a lot of early. Zach Wilson is going to be the quarterback in there for at least a couple of years. So I don't mind. I think Dave's on the right track here. I would probably take the Wilson side in a vacuum. But again, your team build makes everything on this trade. It's not so cut and dry. And he just chimed in. He only has Herbert. I would definitely take Zach Wilson if you only have Herbert. Like if you're not strong at QB, you got to get Wilson. I 100% agree with that trade.
I agree with that sentiment. I'd rather try and see if I could get someone else rather than Wilson with that.
See, I'd rather get Wilson and then do Wilson plus for somebody better. You know what I mean? Like, this is not the last trade you make. This is not the end of the year. Trades are done after. No, give me Wilson. Agreed. That helps.
I think there's no need to go out and get a bad quarterback to try and trade him for another quarterback. So I'd rather just use the pick and you can try and get a different quarterback. But again, I'm pretty sure it's Larry. I know he likes them, so go get your quarterback, Larry. I agree. To me, that's a fair price to pay for a low-end quarterback in a 16-teamer, the 108 and Ayuk. So, Andrew, back to our trade targets.
Yeah, my other trade target and my last one, I guess, for the night would be, and I think it's kind of odd putting this on a Tuesday instead of a Thursday because he plays on Thursday, but it's Darnell Mooney. I think Mooney is one of those guys with Robinson out and most likely not coming back to the team. I think Mooney is one of those guys that could be an easy wide receiver 1 on his own team next year. And obviously a lot of people like Mooney. Whoever's got Mooney is probably a big Mooney fan. So you're not going to get somebody who's going to sell him on the cheap. But I don't mind overpaying for Mooney if he's an ascending asset and I'm sending people who are declining assets. So for me, Darnell Mooney is one of those guys that I love targeting, especially for contenders, but even for rebuilders. Like, what does it take? A first for Mooney plus, a first for Mooney and a third, a first for Mooney and, I don't know, Jared Patterson, like one of those running backs who might be something. Like, maybe that makes sense. So again, it depends on the construct of your league and everything. But Darnell Mooney he's coming on. He played well last week with Dalton, and we're going to see him. Everybody's going to see him when they're digesting their turkey this week on Thanksgiving. So I think Mooney could have a big breakout game against the Lions and kind of become somebody that we're all talking about, like Allen Robinson who. So yeah, Mooney's somebody I love this year. And I think he's just gotten stronger and stronger with every week.
Yeah, I like that one too, because I think Robinson's out of there after this year. He's on the franchise tag. I think part of the reason what we're seeing from Allen Robinson is because he's on the franchise tag and doesn't want to be there, in addition to, bad play calling and not great quarterbacking until Fields has been coming around recently. So, yeah, that's a good one. And like you said, it's his value is rising, but I think it could rise even higher. When Robinson leaves, I think he's still going to be the guy next year, unless they spend a ton of money on somebody. Which I don't think it's there's some good wide receivers out there in this class, but I think the cream of the crop is kind of him and potentially Godwin. Is Robinson and potentially Godwin, I think so. And Robinson isn't staying there, so.
Well, Dave is actually putting it perfectly here. It would take a first to get Mooney, but I'm not sure I would pay a first to get him. And that's kind of what we come down to in a lot of this is like buying and selling are different numbers. I completely agree with that logic. It would take at least a first to get Mooney, in my opinion, because anybody who's got Mooney thinks he's worth a first. I mean, again, I'm saying this generally, but again, if you have Mooney on your roster, you're not going to send it. You're not going to give him away for a second. It's going to take a lot to get him off your roster. But if I didn't have Mooney, it'd take a lot to be like, well, Mooney plus. Like for a first is a lot. Maybe a late first. Like if you think you're a contender and it's a 110, 112, something like that in Superflex, I don't mind that. But again, it might take more than that just to get him off that roster. So that's one of those prime cases of values are so different to buy and sell. Maybe it doesn't work out, but that's who I would target.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I like the idea of trying to get a little plus with it to kind of make you feel better about giving up that first, like you said.
Right. Even if it's like a third, like a 2023 third, so just make me feel a little bit better about it.
Yep. And like my other co-host, Russ, always says, thirds get deals done. So
that's right.
So Jay, you got one more here before we finish up?
Yes, I do. So the last one is CMC. I've been seeing a lot of conversation on our show. We play it, I think I mentioned it before, a game poll perception. It's all around different trade polls, and there's been a lot of CMC plus JT talk in these polls lately. I think a lot of people don't consider CMC the 101 anymore. They see him as old. He's 25 years old. They see him as injury prone, all these different labels. But what we've seen on the field, even as soon as he came back, is that CMC is himself. And so I think he's a potential value.
I agree there. And I think there's even contenders that could be thinking like, maybe I should get out of CMC now, thinking, I can get a decent haul back for him. And you would have to give up a decent haul, but I still think, you're going to get that as long as he doesn't re-injure that hamstring. We've pretty much seen he's kind of eased back a little in that first game. He's picking it up in the second game this past week. And I think we're still going to see prime CMC as long as he can, keep those hamstrings healthy and whatever else is hurting him over there. So I don't mind that at all. I would gladly, try and get a CMC. And like you said, I think you can get him a little cheaper than you could, even 2 months ago at the beginning of the season. So because all these injuries are adding up. So
I want to say this. I think there is a maybe a disconnect in recency bias a little bit in the, I don't know, dynasty community at large. I think we saw a lot of people going into last week thinking, CMC is still the 101. Taylor's good. Najee Harris might be up there. Dalvin Cook, all these names. And then Jonathan Taylor goes out and gets 5 total touchdowns, 185 yards. He dominates. And everybody is immediately assuming, all right, 101, Jonathan Taylor. Well, hang on a minute now. That was 1 week. Yes, he's had a good year, and I'm not at all
I was just
bemoaning Jonathan
it's not
Taylor.
been just 1 week. He's
No,
the
but
first
I'm
guy
saying,
since LT to have eight games in a row with 100 and a touchdown.
Yep, and we all remember Alvin Kamara last year with the 6 touchdowns and all this, right? Like, it was a dominant performance. It won me a couple leagues. I didn't win in a couple with him, which is weird. But what I'm getting at with this is I think there is a perception that you could send Taylor for CMC and a solid starting piece. And that's where I come back to this whole thing about value. And I think this is where a lot of times the conversation is too nuanced to really have on Twitter when you only have 120 or 280 characters, whatever it is, and everybody's trying to dunk on everybody, and you're trying to make one quick comment and then mic drop and be out. There is a lot of conversation to say, all right, what if I traded Taylor for CMC and Deontay Johnson? Wouldn't you say yes to that? Like, what is the logic to be like, is the drop from Taylor to CMC and Dynasty that big? I don't think it is. Listen, this week we could see CMC get 5 touchdowns. All right, Christian McCaffrey goes out and gets 5 touchdowns. Taylor gets 110 yards, no touchdowns. Are we all flipping back to CMC being 101? Dynasty cannot be that reactive in my mind. Like, I don't think Dynasty should be that like overcorrective. And this is where I think it gets kind of murky because CMC, yes, he's been injury prone, and I'm not arguing any of that, but I'm just saying, like, he's not chopped liver. You know what I mean? Like, he's not done. He's 25. That's not that old. And honestly, with Cam back there, CMC could be back to 2018 CMC, which was the number 1 running back in all of NFL. So I'm just putting this out to be like, hey, 1 week samples are great. We like taking victory laps. Everybody on Twitter does it. And I'm a big fan of Jonathan Taylor. Don't get me wrong, but I'm telling you what, if somebody comes at me and is like, I need Jonathan Taylor, he's the number 101 overall in all of Dynasty. That was Chase. Remember a couple years ago, weeks ago, Jamar Chase was the 101, right? Everybody was like, Jamar Chase, the 101 in Dynasty. He didn't do anything this week, so now it's Jonathan Taylor. This overreactive thing in Dynasty, especially on Twitter, is getting a little bit out of hand, and I think a lot of people are ignoring CMC. So I love that pick, JL. I think that there is actually a lot of value in Christian McCaffrey, and I think if you go out there and just, again, poke the guy that's got CMC, you never know what you're going to get. He has not blown up. He's done terrific, but he has not had that Jonathan Taylor kind of week that makes that manager go, man, he's my guy and I got to have him forever. It's not that case anymore. Like, there is a very potential chance here as a contender. You can get CMC for less than you would have even 3 weeks ago when he was hurt, which is mind blowing to me.
First of all, Andrew, Dynasty is that reactive, especially on Twitter.
But it shouldn't be.
I always say it's so funny to me for a game that, like, so many people talk about looking at the long term and all this stuff. We, not me specifically, but we as a whole overreact to every little thing that happens in such a dramatic manner. It's so funny.
Well, it's a prime case of watch what the market does and try to zig when others are zagging, right? Like, keep your eyes on the prize. Let's look at the long picture here. Christian McCaffrey is still a beast. So again, great pick, John Luke. I love it.
And then for both you guys, I'll go to you first, John Luke. JT for CMC in the first.
So
which side you taking?
We played. I think Eric is saying this because he was in there playing today. Yeah, we played a poll perception with Marcus Grant today, and that was one of the.
Which side did it come out on? Do you remember?
I can't remember. I think it was on the CMC plus the first side. I'm pretty sure it was.
Is that the side you would go with?
That was absolutely the side I would go with. I don't think there's that big of a gap between CMC and
I'm with you too. And I think a lot of it is too that the other thing with the Dynasty community as a whole is, especially on Twitter, is extremely ageist. So getting back those years with JT is a big thing there, especially in a Twitter poll. I assume you would go with CMC in the first two, Andrew.
For sure. Yeah, I just feel like it's almost a no-brainer. The difference between JT and CMC is maybe a third at this point in my book, like maybe a late second.
Yeah.
I mean, the gap is so negligible, but everyone and their mother is talking about JT and Dynasty like he's the next coming of CMC. Well, geez, I don't know. Maybe give me CMC in the first. Are you kidding me? Like, that's easy value. What the heck are we talking about here? I mean, CMC is not hurt right now, and McCaffrey is one of those guys too. Again, with Cam Newton, we saw this dominate. We saw this happen. This is not a Sam Darnold-led quarterback offense. Like, Christian McCaffrey is still Christian McCaffrey, but at the same time, his injury proneness, and same with Barkley, right? Like some of these guys that are top tier athletes are getting hurt in a game where they collide with each other. Whoa, never saw it coming. Are you kidding me? Like, of course they're going to get hurt. Like, this is part of the game. So I just don't understand why we're all overreacting. Like, all of a sudden, CMC is chopped liver. Are you kidding me? No. Give me the CMC in the first every day. Not even a question.
I agree, but I will say, in defense of the JT 101 idea, is from week 3. I'm sorry, I meant to do that. I messed my stats up here.
Well, while you look
Week
that up,
4
I want to say this.
No, I got it. Week 4 on, he's averaging in PPR CMC like numbers. He's average, and that's bolstered by the 50-point week this past week. But he's averaging 29 points a game since week 4.
I'm not using this to crap on JT. This is not me saying Taylor is not good. That's not it. Taylor is amazing. Jonathan Taylor is a beast.
Yeah, that's
and
my
he
point.
is winning people leagues. He's amazing. But I just think that a lot of times people are kind of overwhelmed or like kind of, I don't know, persuaded by that new toy and forgetting the old one. And I think in all honesty too, I think Jonathan Taylor, if you'd asked people before he had this 5-game breakout, 5-touchdown breakout in this game, people would probably put CMC ahead of him, but it would have been close. And now it's like, now it's not close at all. And Jonathan Taylor's way ahead. That's one game, man. In all honesty, these guys will most likely have a 50-game sample. And we're looking at one game to decide like where their future is going. Yes, Jonathan Taylor is younger and on a different offense and is not as injury prone. And all. I don't know. I feel like if CMC gets 5 touchdowns this week, is he the number 1 again? Like, what are we doing? Like, you got to be honestly, like, keep your eyes on the prize here. The value is easily on Christian McCaffrey in the first if you're looking at that trade in a vacuum. But again, I understand how it is. I would be happy to send Taylor for CMC in a first, but I'm not. I don't know. I'm not overreacting to it, I guess is what I'm saying. I love Taylor, but I don't know.
Yeah, and I would have Taylor ahead of CMC because of the age, because he's producing on the level he is now. But
by
I
a
agree,
first?
it's not by
a whole first?
No,
Like, my
I
goodness.
agree. I would take CMC in the first for sure. And okay, so I had one more, and then we'll move on to find me a trade. And this is probably the most expensive of the guys that I put down. It's and anyone who's listened to me on here, Trade Access, will be no surprise. It's Deontay Johnson. It's a guy I've been talking about since before last season. He's a great route runner, great at getting separation. And this one actually works as if you're a contender or a rebuilder because he's only 25 years old. And to some people that may be that's old if you're rebuilding. But yeah, the 25-year-old still has 5 years in the league. But one of the things I wanted to point out about him, I was listening to JJ Zachariason on the late round pod today, and he mentioned that not Deontay Johnson specifically, Pittsburgh has had the hardest wide receiver schedule so far this year. And Deontay Johnson is still producing as a wide receiver 1. If you go on a points per game basis, he's wide receiver 11. He's not going to show that way in your overall total point list, but he's wide receiver 11. And the other interesting note that JJ pointed out when he said this is going forward. And again, this is kind of the theme of my guys' schedule. He's got the easiest wide receiver schedule coming up. So, he's got the Vikings, the Ravens, who've been a bad pass defense this year, Titans, Chiefs. He's got a lot of nice matchups coming up. And even with this, hardest schedule, I mean, it's ridiculous, his consistency. It's like 14.6, 19.5, 24.2, 15.2, 18 point. He's maybe not as sexy because he's not going to have that 9 for 143 and 2 touchdowns that you get from Justin Jefferson, but the guy's just going to give you 15 to 25 points like every single week. It's insane. He gets targeted like crazy. He's got 95 on the year already. So, like I said, works as if you're a contender, works if you're a rebuilder. Go get Deontay Johnson. Anything from either of you guys before we move on to find me a trade in terms of Deontay Johnson or anything else before we finish up? Okay.
Nailed it.
All good. Okay, let's move on to find me a trade then. This one this week is submitted by friend of the show and member of the Junkies Listener League, Jake Earl, at the Jake Earl on Twitter. I'm going to get in the settings here, and I'm going to let do you have the roster up there, Andrew? Can I let you go through the roster? It's a 12-team PPR Superflex, 0.2 points per carry, 1.5 tight end premium. So a lot of going on here in the settings with the scoring. 4-point passing TDs, And I actually noticed no negatives for interceptions, which I thought was kind of interesting. And 25-man rosters, 5 taxi, start 10, quarterback, 1 of each position basically, plus the super flex, and then 5 more flex. So it's a lot of roster flexibility with this. And not that this is necessarily super relevant for the trade, but the league goes by victory points, and so that kind of factors into where he's at. He's, I think, I don't have the standings up in front of me. He's got a decent record. His victory points put him at the 6th spot overall right now. So he's kind of on the edge of the playoff race, but there's only really 7 teams that have a playoff shot looking at it in terms of what the victory points are. So it looks like he has a pretty good chance of the playoffs. He's got to beat out 1 team. So we'll get to his roster then, and then I'll just go over his little summary here after you get the roster, Andrew.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm pulling up his roster right here if you're following online on YouTube here. So here's what's happening. This, in my opinion, this is a team that needs a little help, but not a lot of help, which is okay. I'm fine with that. I like the team name Fat Tony in a Simpsons league. I'm always a fan of that. But he's got Mac Jones, he's got Matt Ryan, and Russell Wilson as his 3 starters. I don't mind that in a super flex. I think that's the way to be. Running back, you got Dalvin Cook, Jonathan Taylor, we were just talking about, but after that, it gets real weak. Receiver, you got Mike Evans, DK Metcalf, Michael Pittman, and that's kind of it, right? That's not the greatest. Tight end, you got Anthony Firkser, Dawson Knox, and Drew Sample, like a lot of weird stuff there. So not the greatest lineup, but again, there is some potential. And then injury reserve, Quintez Cephas, Tyler Croft, a couple guys on taxi, but nothing really that flashy. On a 25-man roster league, I feel like you have some holes. So I guess, JL, what was your trade? Let's start with you before we gotta get into ours.
All right, so my trade, it seems like there's obviously a weakness at tight end. I mean, you got Dawson Knox, which is all right. I don't know if that's a long-term solution, but it's a tight end premium league. Dalvin Cook is definitely the type of player who I like to see if I can move around in Dynasty, mostly because like he's reached a ceiling, right? Like how much value Davin Cook is a production play at this point. You know, he's a first round pick in most startup drafts. So I'm not too he's absolutely someone I would try to be shopping around in a with a team like that where you can really you really want to. I don't know how I didn't get a chance to look at the records, but I imagine that that you know if you're not contending this year, then this is a move I want to make. And so the trade I have is Dalvin Cook and Antonio Brown for Kyle Pitts.
Interesting. I don't hate that actually. I kind of did something a little similar. It maybe gives him a little more contention, but it's not like Pitts is a guy like, oh well, you're just out if you trade for Kyle Pitts. Right. But he's definitely points wise a downgrade this year from Dalvin Cook. Pitts is a downgrade from Dalvin Cook. I just completely blanked there for a second. Anyway, but I definitely I think value wise it makes some sense. I mean, Antonio Brown is nice for a contender, but really has no dynasty value. So I think Pitts at this point, even not necessarily to a contender, but I do think he has more dynasty value at this point. So, and I'm going to kind of get into this with my trade, but if he's ready to kind of not worry about this season, even though he's in the playoff race, I like it a lot. Andrew, anything you want to say there before we finish up?
I'll keep mine brief. I think Dalvin Cook is actually a perfect choice to move off of. And I saw your trade, so that's why I didn't put it on mine, and we'll get into that. But I love the idea of getting Kyle Pitts on this team because that is your biggest weakness. And I think looking at the numbers on this, the way this league is set up, Fat Tony, the guy that we're looking at here for Jake, he's 5th in the league in scoring, but 7th in record. You're right in the middle. That's the worst place to be in Dynasty. So I love the idea of getting rid of a running back, kind of rebuilding, like retooling a little bit. Let's send some options away to get a good young tight end. I think that's a terrific option for a trade.
Yep, I like it. So, JL, I know we're going a little long here and you need to get out of here. So I just want to let you, sign off, remind everybody where they can find you, all the stuff you're doing. And then me and Andrew will finish up with our trades.
I appreciate you guys having me on. This was the blast. We'll definitely have to do it again. You can find me on Twitter at FYF John Luke. And if you want to check out the game show, go watch Rocky just absolutely whoop our ass. Check out Front Yard Fantasy on YouTube.
Okay, thanks again for coming on, JL. We'll talk to you again soon. Appreciate it.
All right, see you guys.
Bye.
Thanks, man.
Okay, so me and Andrew will finish up with our trades. And if anyone's watching, I'm going to get this off the screen. Thank you, Andrew. Andrew's quicker with it than I am. So I'll get into my trades since we were kind of talking about Cook there. And just we kind of skipped over it because we knew we had to, JL needed to go here. But I just wanted to just mention, he said it was an orphan team he took over last winter. He completely blew it up and put it back together again, mostly spent all of his draft capital and shipped off McCaffrey and Mahomes. Clearly lacking an impact tight end, which we all, agreed with. And I think all of our trades targeted as tight end and some depth to compete with the top teams. And that is part of it for me here, is that there are two top teams that are really, really good. They're like hundreds, like a couple hundred points ahead of I think everyone else in the league.
Yeah.
So the way I looked at this was I don't mind making the playoffs because he's got a really good chance of making it anyway. I'm not blowing this up or anything because he's done a fairly nice job so far, but he's right. He lacks depth. I was looking at it trying to figure out what his weekly lineup would be, and I got to about 7 and 8 guys, and I didn't know who else I would start. So he's got a pretty weak depth in terms of even just filling out a starting lineup. So I'm not worried about this season. I'm not trying to avoid the playoffs this season or anything, but I'm not worried about that. So that's what I look to do, is move off of Cook. I think it's a good time to do so. This is probably the peak value he's ever going to have again. Right as we're heading into the playoff stretch, everyone's worried about points. Everyone's worried about having those running backs. He's still producing right now. As soon as we hit this offseason, he's just going to keep declining and declining as a 26-year-old, 27-year-old running back. Even if he produces, he's going to keep declining. So I like the idea, since I don't think you have – sorry, Jake. I don't think you have a great shot to win the title this year, even if you get into the playoffs. So I like the idea of moving off Dalvin Cook, and I had two ideas. One was I would start by trying for Antonio Gibson and Dallas Goddard, who we also talked about earlier. Like I said, it's hard to fill out his lineup, and I still believe in Gibson, even though I don't expect him to necessarily take a huge jump the rest of this year. I still believe in the talent, and if they can ever get J.D. McKissick out of there, I think we could see a big bump in value, because the guy was a friggin' receiver in college, and they never used him in the passing game. So he has that in his skill set. And Goddard gives him the young tight end. We were talking about that he needs a guy he can have for years, not necessarily a stud like we said earlier, but a guy I think you can put in there every week and feel fine about. And for the team you'd be trading him to, which is Otto's Jacket, he's essentially that team's third tight end. Team's got Pitts, the team's got Hawkinson, and this is actually, I think, the team Andrew you targeted. So it could make it easier to acquire either of those guys. I don't think Pitts is ever easy to acquire, but getting Hawk or Goddard off the guy, you could figure, I don't need three of these guys, and let me take Cook, who's especially over Goddard. I think is, even with the premium, Cook is a nice upgrade in points for this guy. And Gibson has been a guy who's been kind of frustrating to own this year.
Oh yeah,
I know myself. I picked up a lot of shares before the season, so he could be ready to be done with him too. If that doesn't work, I did think maybe that's a little pricey for Cook. I wasn't sure. Maybe not. I mean, he might do that. But I also like the idea of targeting Hollywood Goddard in a second. Hollywood's another guy that I think hasn't gotten the love he quite deserves yet. He's a wide receiver one this year. I think he's still going to produce, even with Bateman there, even with Andrews there. I do think Lamar's improvement as a passer is gonna, and he has improved as a passer, I believe, is gonna lead to more volume there, even when Dobbins is back next year. So Hollywood's converted me, and then you get Goddard, you get the second, you get three pieces, you get depth, you lose the running back, but hopefully you can make a trade somewhere else.
I just want to jump in with this. I just want to jump in with this. Otto's Jacket doesn't have Marquise Brown, so I don't know if you were seeing AJ Brown.
I believe he had him on his injured reserve. No,
true. There you go.
Yeah,
I stand erected,
and that's the other. And that's the other thing with him too. It's sort of like,
Yep.
what have you done for me lately? He's not been getting points from him recently. Even the game before he got, missed the game last week, I think he had like 8 points. Everyone's talking about Bateman. He also, another reason I liked it is he has Bateman. And
that's where I was going to go with mine. Yep.
When I have guys like that, when I have two guys like that, I generally do like to, if I can get the right value, I don't do it just to do it, but I like to split those kind of guys up, which I think makes it more intriguing for the guy you're sending the offer to. So I mean, I like the Gibson one more. I think you're getting better value back with Gibson and Goddard, especially in a 0.2 PPC. You want to get the running back. But I wouldn't mind doing the other. So what do you think? And then we can move on to yours.
So I like the Gibson one a lot too. I think that was probably the better trade that I've seen on this sheet that we talked about. I think that Dalvin Cook is an easy piece to trade away to one of those guys in the top 3 or 4. And the way this league is set up, I was going to get into this on mine, but it makes sense here too. The top 2 teams are hundreds of points, literally 200 or 300, 400 points ahead of the third place team, which is Otto's Jacket. Right. So if I'm Otto's Jacket, I'm looking this like I need to move on. I need to find something that helps elevate me up to their level.
Right. Which, by the way,
is
something I was looking to do, and it's good advice to people is, I did not want to target those top 2 teams, because if I'm them, I'm like, why do I need to do this? Like,
that's exactly right. I always look at the league standings and kind of see who's next in line, who's third. And so like you've got Sideshow Bob is 11-0. You've got Groundskeeper Willie at 8-3, but both of those teams have 2,200 points. And then you got Otto's Jacket at 1,874. So it's like Otto's Jacket is looking at this like, how am I going to beat these guys?
Yep.
He needs to make a move to beat these guys. Those guys above him don't need to make a move at all. And again, Scott Connor is Groundskeeper Willie, Dynasty and Chill, obviously friend of the podcast and everything. I love that guy. He knows what he's up to, right? He's a portfolio player like Scott. He has 50 teams and is managing all of them probably tremendously well and better than I'll ever manage any one. But the point I'm looking at is those are not players I'm targeting in my fantasy league. I would like to get the 3rd or 4th or 5th team, and he is the 5th team, but like 3rd or 4th team, like to kind of say, like, what do you need to put you over that edge? And Dalvin Cook could turn Otto's Jacket into a contender as we go down the stretch. So I love that logic. And my trade was on the same mindset, but it's almost looking at more of the future and saying, all right, if I have this team, if I am Fat Tony in this league, and I'm looking at it like, man, you know what? Even if I get into playoffs, do I really have a chance? Maybe, maybe not. I'm in the middle. Do I really care? Maybe it's time to just move on, right? Like, let me just get out of this. Let me just see what I can do. And I think part of it is the tight end is obviously a weak spot. So my thought was, again, going back to what we talked about before, was send Mike Evans and Dawson Knox to Otto's Jacket for TJ Hawkinson and Rashad Bateman. And you hit on it a little bit. I didn't realize that he had Marquise Brown because he was on IR. That was a smart move. But I'm looking at it still like Rashad Bateman, even with Marquise Brown, this past week without Marquise Brown wasn't great, didn't dominate. Granted, Lamar wasn't there, but that offense struggled entirely. And I'm looking at it like, if I am Otto's Jacket, upgrading from Rashad Bateman to Mike Evans is a substantial upgrade. We don't know how long Tom Brady's going to be there, but he's definitely there this year. And you've got guys on the tight end. You don't need TJ Hawkinson. You're not starting TJ Hawkinson in most situations because you've got Kyle Pitts and Dallas Goddard. So, like, what do you need TJ Hawkinson for? You're probably benching him if you're smart, to be honest, because he's been so hit or miss. Get Hawkinson off your roster, add a guaranteed starter like Evans. Yeah, you're giving up Bateman, but again, you don't want to be too heavily invested in Baltimore, as we found out. So I just feel like that, to me, was the kind of trade I would do, is still send a young tight end back, right? You got Pitts, you got Goddard. Those are young tight ends, but Dawson Knox still has some value. And you get Hawkinson and Bateman as a rebuilder, even if you're in the middle. I feel like that helps your team out. It helps Otto's Jacket out to be a little bit more contentious as we go through the rest of this year. So that was kind of my thought, is that same logic, right? Still send something for a tight end, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on that one, Rocky? I know you're a TJ fan, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like it a lot, and I am a TJ fan. I think he'll be even better next year. I also do like, even though I like Hollywood, I do like Bateman, and I think this makes a lot of sense. And I love the idea of sending Knox, because Knox has some appeal in as a guy that has produced to some extent this year. But if I have him, I'd prefer to get out on him for that value, for that.
He's got name value.
Yeah,
he's one of those guys
now
that
he does.
you're like, ooh, Dawson Knox. Like,
yeah, but until this past week, he was not getting. This week, he got 10 targets. But until this past week, he was living off of touchdowns before he got injured. So I like moving off from Knox and kind of using that as sort of an appeal to maybe, oh, well, you're still getting Dawson Knox back plus Mike. I mean, whereas I don't really care about losing Dawson Knox. So.
Well, it's also, it looks kind of clean on a trade. And I try to do this if I can, especially if I wouldn't say I'm trying to sneak something past the goalie here, but like it's a wide receiver and a tight end for a wide receiver and a tight end. So like you're not having to overthink this and be like, well, how's my depth at this position? It's literally just changing of both. And sometimes those are, in my opinion anyway, sometimes those are easier to accept. When I get a trade like this in my inbox, I'm like, all right, I don't have to look at my running backs. I don't have to look at my quarterbacks. Like I know I'm okay on these, and I upgrade from Hawkinson to Evans, which for this year is a substantial upgrade on points. And Bateman and Knox, obviously Bateman is more, but I'm not starting Bateman in most leagues anyway with the way this is going. Yeah, when Brown's out, but I want to go all in. And Evans is the best player in that trade, in my opinion, even though I like Hawkinson. He's been up and down this year. So there are a lot of people that look at that and go, I just want the best player. That's Evans, smash, accept, move on. All right.
Yeah, and I like the thing with both of our trades is we basically agree. I think that he's not gonna compete this year. So let's move off some of those older guys, get some younger guys, but also younger guys that have already proved something, other than maybe Bateman.
Younger value guys.
Something. Yeah.
But at the same time, like you might contend this year, right? Like you're right in the middle of the pack. And I can't tell you how many times I've been in, especially in Dynasty even, where like I've been that 5th place team and I win it all. And I'm like, I did not deserve to win this. You know what I mean? Like I did not deserve to win this. But I got lucky. I got hot at the right time. I got the right players. Nobody got hurt. So again, you're not giving up value for picks. Yeah, right. Like you're still getting value back for your roster. You're still putting in starting lineup caliber players. If they blow up, maybe you win. I don't know. You're not giving up.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say is, it's not like you have to just say, oh, well, I'm not making the playoffs with these trades either, because you're getting in both cases, guys, other than mine, I included a second in one of them, but you're getting other than that, you're getting a guy you can throw in your lineup. So exactly. I like it a lot. It's kind of like, it's kind of the perfect move here to do when you're stuck in the middle. You don't necessarily give up on the season, but you're still looking forward and getting younger guys who can potentially increase in value. And if you want to move on from them, you can maybe get something else, or else they just produce a lot more than they're producing now, maybe in 22 or 23.
Well, it's like a soft pivot, right? Like it's not a hard pivot. You're not going straight into picks. You're not blowing it up. It's a retool, not a rebuild, as we sometimes like to say.
Exactly.
You're pivoting to players that are going to be future worthy, but still have now value. So you're not giving up. That's the whole point.
Yep. Agreed. So that I think finishes us up here. So I would just want to, again, even though he's not here, thank JL for coming on. I had a good time talking to him tonight. Also just want to remind everyone where you can find us at Dynasty Junkies on Twitter. You can also watch us at the DAP Network Twitter feed at DAP_network. Also subscribe to the YouTube for DAP Network. Click the bell so you can be notified when we're going live, when timelines going live, and all that good stuff. You can find me at Dynasty FF Addict, Andrew at Andrew Hall FF, and our third host Scott Sidlow at Scott_Sidlow. If you do have any find me a trades, any rosters you want to do to have us look over and talk about trades with, you can DM any of the three of us or the pod account, and we'll get back to you and use it on the show. The only other thing I guess I want to say is if you like what you've heard tonight, please give us a subscribe if you're not already. A rating and review really helps people find us. So would love to hear that as well and see what you think of the show and what we can do to improve. So with that said, I think we're finished. Andrew, you want to take us out?
Oh, yeah. Another good week. Another good time talking to you, Rocky. Really appreciate it.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
That's right. Happy Thanksgiving and Junkies out.